Receive this passage from the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew in the 16th chapter. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to the disciples that he must go to Jerusalem to suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and religious scholars, and that he must be killed, and on the third day raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Never, Rabbi," he said. "This will never happen to you." Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get yourself behind me, you Satan. You are trying to make me stumble and fall. You are setting your mind not on the things of God, but of mortals." Then Jesus said to the disciples, "If you wish to come after me, you must deny your very selves, take up the instrument of your own death, and begin to follow in my footsteps. If you would save your life, you will lose it. But if you would lose your life for my sake, you will find it. What profit would you show if you gained the whole world but lost yourself? What can you offer in exchange for your very self? The promised one will come in the glory of Abba God, accompanied by the angels, and will repay all according to their conduct. The truth is, some of you standing here will not taste death before the coming of the promised one's reign." A reading from Romans in the 12th chapter. Your love must be sincere. Hate what is evil and cling to what is good. Love one another with the affection of sisters and brothers. Try to outdo one another in showing respect. Don't grow slack, but be fervent in spirit. The one you serve is Christ. Rejoice in hope. Be patient under trial. Persevere in prayer. Look on the needs of God's holy people as your own. Be generous in offering hospitality. Bless your persecutors, bless, and don't curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Have the same attitude towards everyone. Don't be condescending to those who aren't as well off as you. Don't be conceited. Don't repay evil with evil. Be concerned with the highest ideal in the eyes of all people. Do all you can to be at peace with everyone. Don't take revenge. Leave room, my friends, for God's wrath. To quote Scripture, "Vengeance is mine, I will pay them back," says our God. But there is more. If your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them drink. For in doing so, you will heap burning coals upon their heads. Don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil by doing good.
Poor Peter. Poor Peter. Just last week, or if you prefer, just 3 verses ago, Jesus was telling Peter that he was the rock on which the church would be built. That whatever Peter bound or loosed would be respectively bound or loosed in heaven. Now Jesus is literally calling Peter Satan. The poor guy. And all he really tried to say was that he didn't want Jesus to die. That he couldn't believe that God would let Jesus die after all the miracles Jesus performed, all the wisdom he taught, all the healings. Peter's misunderstanding is all too understandable. Of course, it's hard for a man who believes in a good God to think that the same God would allow the death of one who had done so much good in the world. It's the normal human reaction. He wants to believe that Jesus wouldn't be met with a ghastly, horrific end as thanks for all of the miracles. And Peter surely meant well when he said it. But what Peter didn't know was that by wishing his teacher and friend wouldn't die horribly, he was kind of undoing the central point of Jesus' ministry and work in the world. Now, opinions vary as to why Jesus needed to die. I'm not particularly fond of the whole sacrificial lamb thing, but it is an interpretation. And even if you can't go for that, it's undeniable that Jesus' work in the world couldn't have ended any other way than by execution. It's the inevitable end to all his teachings, all his attempts to liberate, to show people to live better. A society as cruel as that one, or indeed as cruel as ours, could never allow Jesus' acts to go uncontested. So however you slice it, Jesus' death was the inevitable end of his ministry, as he told us on several occasions. And of course, we don't particularly like that. It's only natural. Jesus didn't particularly like it either. He later prayed that if there was any way to spare him his suffering, that it be done. He was genuinely tempted by the prospect of not dying on the cross. Perhaps that's why he reacted so harshly to Peter. Perhaps that's why his rebuke needed to be so forceful, because he feared that he might be talked out of what he knew must come to pass. However you look at it, Peter's suggestion was well meant, but it opposed everything Jesus' ministry was about, because a central part of that ministry was teaching us about the value of sacrificing ourselves. And like any good teacher, Jesus wouldn't exempt himself from living out his own teachings. So it was that when faced with the possibility of opting out of the crucifixion, it was his responsibility to explain to the apostles that no, this was the point. He had to die, and in dying, he had to teach us how to die ourselves. We, of course, got lucky because our dying is symbolic. It really means death of the ego, the end of putting our own needs first, the command to love others so much that we forget the biological imperative to preserve ourselves and those who share our genetic material. And much of what that ego death looks like is exactly what Paul shares with us in today's epistolary text from Romans, always seeking to outdo one another in generosity and hospitality, caring for the saints among us and welcoming strangers, blessing others even when they're being nasty to us, being a friend to those of low social status and not puffing ourselves up, forgiving wrongs and living peacefully with others as much as it is in our power to do so. All of that is at its heart just about putting others first. This is what it looks like in practice to die to oneself. It's hard. Not dying on a cross hard, but it is very hard to always put others first, to be kind even to those who repay that kindness with spite. It is a difficult thing to do, and it wears on you over time. And like it or not, it is our calling as Christians. That's the deal we take, to emulate Jesus in every respect, including the dying part, though thankfully most of us don't have to literally emulate that bit. And to be honest with you, we're not doing great at this. I mean, I can't speak on every single individual Christian, but as a capital C church anyway, we're not excelling. I know you all know this. I don't know where along the line we started messing this up so bad. Maybe we never quite got it right. But it cannot be denied that we've been getting this wrong for a long time. The fact that the church ever condoned chattel slavery tells me we didn't know how to die to ourselves then, or we would have plainly seen that the well-being of others was more important than our financial gain. Colonial missions and forced conversion of indigenous people tells me we didn't know how to die to ourselves then, or we would have plainly seen that bringing suffering to innocent people was not just a necessary cost of spreading the gospel. Wars between Catholicism and Protestantism and all other manner of denominational divides tell me that we didn't know how to die to ourselves then, or we would have plainly seen that it is far more important to care for one another than to insist that our beliefs are the only real Christian beliefs. The Crusades tell me that we did not know how to die to ourselves then, or we would have plainly seen that no piece of land, no matter how holy, is worth bringing death to others. A lot of doomsayers would tell you that it's the modern times that have become the disease of our age, that we've lost our way and the end is coming soon for that. But trust me, we lost our way so long ago that if it ended now because of it, it's really just kind of overdone. We've been getting this central part of our faith so wrong for so long, I have no idea where across the centuries to pinpoint what made us lose our way. I just know that the church is not living up to the ideals Paul taught us, or the taking up of our own cross that Jesus commanded of us. Today's church, too, has become so wrapped up in the same human things that Peter accidentally tempted Jesus with that we're largely indistinguishable from the wider culture. People don't show their faith today by putting others before themselves. People show their faith by spending money on t-shirts and necklaces, using material objects to demonstrate membership in a faith where Jesus literally told us to sell everything we own. People show their faith by participation in political movements that heap additional hardships upon the poor and suffering to demonstrate their membership in a faith where we are commanded to care for the poor and be in solidarity with them. People show their faith by preaching to the poor, to queer people, to people of color, to all manners of marginalized people that God personally disapproves of them, to demonstrate their membership of the faith that teaches us that there is no man nor woman, no slave nor free, no Jew nor Gentile, that all the categories we've divided ourselves into have been scrubbed away. The church has become so comfortable acquiescing to human things, to capitalism, bigotry, greed, and selfishness, that we don't even stand out in the world anymore except in just how viciously we have used our faith to justify the ugliest elements of the world we live in. And what's worse is that people can hear us loud and clear on this. They know, and they're rejecting this corruption of the Christian faith. And as membership declines nationwide and public opinion turns against religion in general, we've begun to cling even more to the institution we've built. We've fallen into the trap of fighting for the church's survival instead of remembering that the church grows when we are willing to give its life. It's natural for us to want to save the institutions that we hold dear, but it is in this very act of trying to save this institution that we are imperiling it. Because the most important part of Paul's injunctions in this Romans text is to let love be genuine, to genuinely care for others so much that they want to know the faith that makes us act the way we do. And people know when they're not being loved genuinely. And when people know that the church is only reaching out to them because it fears its own death, they want no part of it. Truly, we are living in the exact situation of losing our life by trying to save us, but with the life of the church. And I don't mean to be too harsh here, because the burden we're asked to take on as individuals is a weighty task. A cross is not an easy thing to bear. And in terms of ego death, there is a sense in which it is kind of impossible. We can't survive without thinking of our own needs at least a little. We cannot survive except by consuming other living things. And even the vegans don't get away from that one. Carrots are also alive. And anyway, we can't put each other first any more than we can all be first. Any Southerner or Midwesterner can tell you that if you both insist on letting the other person go first, then you both end up standing in front of the door forever. Gratefully receiving hospitality is just as ethical as giving it. And self-care, as much as it too has been transformed into a capitalist buzzword, is crucial. We cannot care for others without caring for ourselves enough to at least keep fed and watered like the complicated little houseplants that we are. Even Jesus, for all his sacrifice, took steps to ensure his own well-being. He went off to pray by himself on many occasions. He took naps in stormy boats. He allowed a woman to anoint his feet out of her own hospitality. And he also cursed a fig tree once, which just tells me he had a lot going on that day. As much as we're called to die to ourselves and place others first, it would be folly to suggest that we must work ourselves into the ground caring for others. In a perfect world, this wouldn't matter, because we all, as a community, would be putting each other's needs first. All our needs would be met, because just as we are putting others before our own needs, others are putting our needs before theirs. That's the kind of community Paul wanted to see built. That's what Jesus taught us, and we're a long way from there right now. But can you just imagine? Imagine what a world we'd be living in today if everyone who called themselves a Christian was willing to die to themselves, to put their own needs aside in order to care for others. Imagine a world where all the poor were well cared for because there were so many Christians thinking of them and providing for them. Imagine a world where Christians everywhere knew that the divides of sex, class, gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, ability, nationality, and Lord, we do divide ourselves a lot of different ways. If we knew that all of these divides are so much less important than the love we have for one another. Imagine a world where Christians weren't known for being judgmental and condemning, but were known for caring for others, even when those others are being nasty and cruel. Imagine a world where all Christians lived at peace with others in every way that was in our power, where we all sought community and were willing to put ourselves aside in pursuit of it. Imagine a world where no one needed to worry about their medical care or their bills or their housing because there were so many Christians willing to help them out. Just imagine that world for me. I'll give you a moment. Now, how beautiful would that be? And listen, it is not possible to never consider our own needs. At least it's not possible for us to do that and survive. But this world I'm describing, this world you're picturing, this world is all too possible. The only thing holding us back from that world is us. If every Christian in the world woke up tomorrow and just resolved to care for others more than ourselves, we would be living in that world. But the odds are that every Christian is not going to suddenly wake up and do that. So if we want that world, someone's going to have to start building it first. Thanks.
It's a time in our service where we collect an offering. For those attending MCC Boston through our social media, you too can participate by going to our website at mccboston.org and clicking on the donate button there for that purpose. Thank you for being a part of our church family. Members and friends of MCC Boston, in many parts of the world, the freedom to worship as you choose is not a recognized fundamental human right. In many more nations, being open about your sexual orientation or gender identity can mean anything from social isolation to the death penalty. As Christians, God calls us to help those in darkness, whatever that darkness may be it personal, social, or spiritual. As MCC, we meet this calling by standing in solidarity with those who are marginalized and oppressed and being partners in working for change. This work includes being witnesses and speaking out against human rights abuses and to be a voice in the international community for justice. By lifting up new generations of remarkable far-reaching spiritual activists, we provide hope while helping to establish a brighter future. Currently, MCC is active in more than 40 countries around the world, training spiritual leaders and organizing faith communities to work for human rights. Through your association with this church, you too are helping to carry out this important work. A portion of your donation this evening supports the global work of our denomination. The rest is used to support and maintaining this church so that we can keep an MCC presence here in Boston. So this week, continue to keep MCC Boston in your prayers. For now, as the basket is presented, please give as you are able, and may God continue to bless you and MCC Boston. Thank you.